Hi, Sher.
Hey, Candace.
How's it going today?
Going great. Good day
Good.
so far. Yeah, really good. I'll just say I met with my coach this morning and we had just such a great, helpful session that brought some um, insight into some things that I've been dealing with. And so, yeah, just been a great day.
Yeah, and I like my days that I get to meet with my coach too.
Yeah.
I never know how that's gonna, sometimes we go pretty deep, and I would say most times we do.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just being able to recognize how empowered I feel after my coaching sessions.
Yeah. I know. It's amazing.
Today on the podcast, we are going to talk about the limbic brain. You and I have had several conversations about this, and we first want our listeners to know in no way are we experts on the brain or the limbic brain, but we have learned enough that it has made a huge difference for us in our healing journey to understand a little bit. And we want to offer some of that to our listeners today and also encourage them to, even go find other resources that can help them understand the limbic brain and how that part of our brain is affected through childhood trauma.
Yeah. And how taking time to become aware of the limbic brain is something that it's not something that we're really taught or that we grow up with understanding of, especially in our generation. I think kids today are much more being helped to recognize emotions and some of that and even trauma. But
Mm.
in our generation, I think, and throughout history, I think it's just something that the limbic brain has been completely unknown, and we have been taught how to function in from our prefrontal cortex, which, yeah, I'll just pause and give just a very brief explanation. And this does not do the topic justice at all. As Candace said, we are not experts, and this is just extremely limited, but we want to bring a glimpse of some things that we hope can be helpful
Mhm.
to people who are on this journey of finding freedom from childhood trauma and developmental trauma, because our society, and I will say, um, particularly, and we might have to edit this out, particularly the church. If you grew up in the church, we are taught how to. I'll just pause in case we want to edit that out. We are taught to live from our prefrontal cortex, and that is what is valued, right? And our prefrontal cortex is where we formulate our thoughts, where we develop strategies, where we live from a perspective that is organized and makes sense and is logical and disciplined.
Mhm.
And so, the process is kind of like, here's the thing that you need to believe. So believe it. Here's the thing that you need to do. So do it.
Mhm.
And that seems to work well for a lot of people. They seem kind of able to do that. And all of us are able to do that in some ways. But
Mhm.
then there are those areas where it seems like no matter how hard we try, we just can't overcome the blocks.
Mhm.
The blocks to why we react to certain things the way we do, why we can't have the behaviors that we really want to have, whether that's like with our kids, right? When we're not patient with our kids and we're yelling at them and we wish that we weren't,
Mhm.
and but we can't seem to stop. Or perhaps the way that we show up in our relationships, maybe we show up distant and disconnected and a little bit cold when really we wish we could show up much more engaged and and be able to move toward trust and intimacy and feelings of connection because we long for that,
Mhm.
but we just can't seem to be able to do it. Okay. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about here is like when we notice that we wish that we could be different in some ways than how we are showing up, it might be worth taking a look at what's going on in the limbic brain.
Mhm.
And the limbic brain, and again, extremely concise to even say this, but it's where um, all of our experiences are stored, all of our memories, all of our perceptions of those memories, all of the beliefs that we formed out of those experiences, all of our emotions that surround those experiences. So these are kind of, if you will, the senses of the soul, I like to call it. You know, our physical senses, we're really taught how to see well, how to hear, how to taste, how to, all of that. What we're not really taught and trained to do is how to be aware of when I'm going into a situation, what memories that are popping up into my mind? What are the perceptions that I have as I walk into this room? Do I feel safe? Do I feel unsafe? Do I feel seen?
Mhm.
Do I feel invisible? Like a lot of times we're not even aware. What are the emotions that I feel? A lot
Mhm.
of times we're not aware or we can't, or we have even a struggle to access what are we even feeling, right? These are the senses of the soul, as I like to call it, or it's the stuff that's stored in the limbic brain. And the reason why we're talking about this today is because as we move toward healing from our childhood trauma, and as we go toward our stories and we start to become familiar with our stories, we can grow in understanding of some of the things that are really going on in our limbic brain that really have had a huge control over lots of aspects of our life and behavior. Um, and if we can slow down and really start to be aware of that, it can be life changing in some really amazing ways. So I'll take a breath, Candace.
No, that was so good and very, very clear. So I appreciate just the way you explained that. And, we've had several conversations and, um, that even helped me again. But I think of this idea of having those unconscious drivers that are coming out of our limbic brain.
Yeah,
And if we don't have some sense of what that means and what that does and why, we will get stuck
yeah,
in patterns that bring shame, bring confusion,
mhm,
bring ambivalence. And this is why we slow down and take the time to understand what's going on in that aspect of our body.
yeah,
Because at the end of the day, like, we want to be helped, we want to be healed, but we also
mm,
want to help others find the help that they need and experience in the healing and freedom they're longing for.
yeah,
Many times we have people that have, quote, done all the right things. They've said all the right things.
yeah,
But then when they still struggle so deeply,
yeah,
they're either going to reach out and get the help they need because they just can't take it anymore, or they will go into hiding and they will go into isolation
yeah,
and they will go deeper into shame
yeah,
because I'm showing up at Bible study, I'm praying, I'm doing all the things that I've been told to do.
mm,
And how could I still be struggling in the way that I'm struggling? And we're saying there's a reason.
yeah. And when we don't uncover the reason, we move toward contempt, either
Mhm.
toward ourselves or toward the other. And a part of that contempt includes judgment and condemnation. And so when we don't understand the why, it's very easy to move toward condemning either myself for how I don't measure up or condemn others for how they're not measuring up.
Mhm. Yeah.
And if we're in that place of condemnation, we're not in the place of compassion, which is really ultimately where we all desperately want to be. We want to be compassionate and we want to feel the love and compassion of others too.
And this is why we do story work,
That's right.
because until we know the stories, we we don't understand why.
Yeah.
And telling those stories to someone else who can help us see the things that we weren't able to see as the child in that story.
Yeah. And
That's why oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, that's why, we say one of the things that has changed us, initially, like we kind of had to slow down is those times that we've heard the person listening say, "Of course,
Yeah.
you would struggle with this or
Yeah.
feel this or think this."
Yeah.
And those simple two words, of course, as you and I both know,
Yeah.
helped us and has helped many other people that we know and work with in this realm.
Yeah. Yes. I love that. And when we talk about struggles, um, we want to really identify this thing that we call the window of tolerance and this spectrum of dysregulation, because our struggle is all about how are we being dysregulated. And do you want to just talk a little bit about arousal? And when we talk about arousal, we're not specifically talking about sexual arousal. We are talking about energy,
Mhm.
energy that goes high or energy that goes lower. And
Yeah.
so, do you want to just talk a little bit about the spectrum?
Yeah, the spectrum, if you're looking at it on a scale from 1 to 10, you have 10 would be hyper arousal, the most hyper aroused.
Mhm.
And that's when you're going to see things like high panic and anxiety and high energy. Um, I like to call it in my own story, powering up.
Yep.
And then you have one that would be at the lowest of hypoarousal, which is going to be low energy,
Mm.
shutting down, extreme disassociation. And so the window of tolerance is going to be between the numbers 4 and 7.
Yep.
And in that space, really, it's the space of what we call more integration because you are calm, you're regulated, you have a flow of your prefrontal cortex and your limbic brain really kind of dancing together in a way that you actually feel pretty safe.
Yeah.
And now the growth edge,
Yep.
when we're dealing with trauma, is just a little bit outside of our window of tolerance to where we can start to notice and slow down and really get into um, what choices that we still feel like we have that we're not being driven by. But
Mhm.
if we get too high or too low,
Mhm.
the limbic brain takes over. And that's when we get into those things of, why do I keep doing what I don't want to do? Or keep saying those things or keep thinking those things. We're outside of our window of tolerance either way in that space.
Yeah, and the reason why we're outside of the window of tolerance will come either we've been triggered by something that happened in a relationship or we saw on a movie or whatever, but we've been triggered. It also can just be innately like all of a sudden a memory pops up and or a smell or something happens that then triggers our limbic brain
Mhm.
and triggers those senses of the soul in some way that then causes us to get dysregulated. And
Mhm.
the reason why understanding this window of tolerance is so helpful is that if I go toward the edge now, I have the awareness to say, ooh, I'm really dysregulated. Like I can name it almost always, I think, where I can say, oh, I'm really dysregulated right now. And then I can ask for help, or I even have some of my own tools that I can implement that can help me come down. Because when we're at the extremes, the 1, the 2, the 9, the 10, we cannot heal. Even when we do story work, we want to stay right on the edge. We want to bring stories and deal with stories that are not taking us into the 9 or 10 where where our prefrontal cortex shuts down. We want to stay in that place where there can be integration, but it's hard. But there can be integration because that's when then the new neural pathways are established that then help us be able to do life differently going forward. So understanding and having awareness in my day-to-day life, and obviously this is a skill that has to be learned, and that I will say we need help learning it. At least I certainly did.
Mm-hmm.
Where when I notice I'm dysregulated now, there's something that I have the awareness that, okay, there's something here that I not only can do, but that I need to do and want to do to bring myself back into that place of integration.
I like what you said about needing help because sometimes we want to just be able to do things on our own, right? And the truth is that we are able to eventually.
Yeah.
I don't know really anyone, including myself, that could do this on my own in the beginning.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what my dysregulation looked like until I had really good eyes and
Yeah.
ears, and more than anything, just such a compassionate response when they would see me becoming dysregulated. What a gift to have that.
Yeah. And just coming back to that aspect of self contempt, which, is only one thing. But I mean, when we don't have others bringing their eyes and their care, we will tend to meet ourselves with self contempt. This is the result of trauma. Um,
Hmm.
we condemn ourselves in that moment, and that has allowed us to survive, but it doesn't allow us to heal.
Hmm.
And so there have been so many times that I remember sharing some aspect of my story or my journey or what I'm struggling with, and I will turn towards self-contempt, and how it will just stop me in my tracks if somebody names that and says, "Ooh, Cher, I just sense that you're being really hard on yourself right now."
Hmm.
I didn't even notice it myself until it was named by somebody else who could bring a different perspective into my perspective that was completely clouded by the trauma.
Yeah, yeah, that's so good because when we do find someone that is not agreeing with our shame and our self-contempt,
Yeah.
I remember when my story coach early on, she would say, I really can't come into agreement with that.
Yeah.
And it would be, some comment that I made towards myself
Yep.
that involves shame or contempt. And man, it took me a while to really sink into how often I did that.
Yeah.
And so, what a gift to have someone um, challenge me in the
Mm.
ways that I was drowning in shame and self contempt.
Yeah. I really love that so much. And it's my experience too. And not just with coaches, but now we have friendships where this is a part of our actual friendship, and it's just glorious. I just have to say it's just a glorious, and
Mm.
I love this about you and yours and my friendship, and how we are very able to stand in the deep waters with each other, and um, kind of bring compassion so that we can move through those deep waters and really receive the healing. I love that so
Mhm.
much.
What you're saying is this place where people are hungering for something different. Like
Yeah.
there's a cry, there's a question of their heart. Is there a better way? Is there a better path? Is there a
Mhm.
different way to do this? And we say, yes, there is.
Yeah. Is it
And
possible? Yes, it is
it is.
possible. Yeah.
Yep.
Love it.
Mhm.
So let's just take the last few minutes talking about what are tools that we use that we have found effective. These aren't just hypothetical, but we use these tools when we recognize that we are dysregulated and we become aware and we want to come back into the window of tolerance. What are a couple of things that you use regularly that you have found really helpful for you? And
Well,
and I'll
you
just say that as a whole, Candace tends to move toward the hyper end of the spectrum. I tend to move toward the hypo end of the spectrum. So I think that that might make a difference also in what we find
Mhm.
helpful.
Mhm. Well, you know my tools, but our listeners may not. So
Yeah. Yep.
um for me, I discovered that when I move my body, my internal struggle and dysregulation begins to calm down. So I found that running is a very good thing for me if I'm getting, really hyper aroused. But also, it could be just those moments of, okay, I feel my heart rate going up. I know that pit in my stomach, and I've named this before on the podcast. It is the fear of abandonment.
Mhm.
That feeling will dysregulate me, but now I'm able to breathe. I'm able to um, say things to myself that feel more true now. And if I can't do that on my own, maybe I even have gone for a run, somebody's phone's going to be ringing.
Yeah. Yeah. Reaching out for help.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because trauma in itself is isolation,
Mhm.
right? And
Yep.
so there's just times I need to come out of that with someone.
Mhm. Absolutely. And me too. And probably all of us, if we're honest.
Mhm.
Yeah. We can't do it alone.
What about you?
Yeah, I think for me, I tend to move towards shutdown or even dissociation. So for me, it's it's grounding, meaning bringing my awareness back to the room and connecting to my body. So it's very much okay. I see the sun is shining. Oh, there's a tree out there. I feel the floor underneath my feet, and a lot of times I'll tap my feet on the floor, or I'll sway a little bit, just to very gently bring myself back because I will feel often like I'm like literally floating away. And I've used those words many times. I just feel like I'm floating away. And so just very gently coming back. And then something that I've been finding really helpful recently is I will tap into the 4 S's for myself. And so a lot of times I will just put my hands on my heart and I'll speak to my inner child and I'll just say, okay, I see you. I see you. I see the distress and I see the feelings that might be popping up in that moment. And I'll
Mhm.
start to just name, I see, here's what I see. I sense you needing to escape because you're so afraid of being rejected or being hurt. Um, and then so then I soothe and I have different ways. It's hand on my heart, it's breathing, it's humming. I have found humming to be
Mhm.
so helpful for me. So yeah, bringing the 4 S's where I see, I soothe, I really evaluate. I don't feel safe right now, but am I safe right now? So see, soothe, safe, and secure. So bringing myself into that place of just feeling very secure
Mhm.
really has become so helpful for me.
Yeah, the 4 S's are what our daily go to, and just having that in the back of my mind when I feel maybe I don't have very many options.
Yeah.
It's just slowing down. I'm like, wait a minute, I do have some options here.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Mm.
good to talk about these aspects. And we know that we're just giving our listeners a taste. It's endless. The research that is being done about these aspects of the brain right now. Again, we want to say to our listeners that we hope that this can be helpful because when we have experienced trauma, we only know the trauma response. But when we are able to recognize our dysregulation and then have tools where we can come back into the window of tolerance, our brain is integrated
Mhm.
and we begin to establish new neural pathways so we
Yes.
can walk on in freedom and in love and in fullness of life that our heart and our soul and our body is longing for. And so that's why we wanted to talk about this today. So just so great to be with you, Candace.
Oh, so good to be with you today too, Cher.
Yeah. Love you
Love you,
lots.
friend.
Love you too.